some who've speculated the Strait will never go back to being the way it was before. What would you say?
I think they're saying that in a doomsday sort of way. I would say it in another way. The Strait is never going back to the way it was because the Iranians have used or tried to use it as a choke point. What we are going to see over the next 2 years, the Strait's going to become irrelevant. It is going to become just another body of water, and I would say that more than 50 or 70% of the energy that moves through the Strait now is going to go through underground pipelines.
So two rather major developments as this week drew to a close. On the one hand, you had this extraordinary development in the Middle East, in Southwest Asia, where Turkey and Saudi Arabia and Pakistan formed this alliance, the Mecca alliance. They signed a defense pact, a strategic alliance between these three countries. That is, I think, a very important development. It has been coming for some time now. Another country that could have joined but didn't was Egypt. This is a very significant development, and I'll try to break it down a little bit in this shortened episode, what it means and why it happened and what it could portend for the region and also for the global economy and U.S. economy as well. Also wanted to just mention this increasing signals coming from the Trump administration, including that Scott Bessent commentary that you heard at the beginning or saw at the beginning of this podcast in the introduction, in the cold open, where Scott Bessent is basically saying, yeah, there's going to be changes in the Persian Gulf. He didn't say that the Iranians are going to get what they want, but he basically implied that, yes, Iranians will have their little control over this Persian Gulf, but by the time we get through with our plans, this little Persian Gulf, that this Strait of Hormuz that they'll control will be meaningless. That's what he's trying to imply, this kind of sour grapes, really the sour grapes strategy. It doesn't look good on you, Scott, especially this guy, Scott Bessent. He is a billionaire, part of the Epstein class. He was basically a protege of George Soros, made a fortune doing exactly the kinds of things that the first version of MAGA, the first version of Trump, was against, this kind of currency trading and speculation. He made his money doing that. He has a massive fortune. He is a gay guy, very out in an administration that has really implied that it wants to trample on gay rights. It hasn't really, but in terms of the military, for example, it's really taken it back. So, I mean, this guy is kind of a hypocritical, ascendant, power-seeking bootlicker, but his comments I'll also try to break down a little bit in this shortened version of the Badlands podcast. I'm Borzou Deragahi. This is Badlands, my podcast. You can subscribe at borzou.substack.com. You can also find me on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on YouTube. Hey, it would be great if you are listening and watching this show. If you wanted to upgrade your subscription to become a paid subscriber, if you can afford it, if you can kick in a bit, that would be wonderful. I would really appreciate that. It would help me finance my life and my work, but it would also give me the opportunity to devote more resources to this podcast, get better guests, better production quality, better tools to upgrade this podcast, make it more robust, make it more lengthy, devote more time to it. So if you wanted to do that, that would be great. And if not, if you could, in addition to subscribing to it here, subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or tell a couple friends about it, that would be really awesome. The more this podcast grows in terms of numbers and revenue that it takes in, the better for independent journalism and independent journalists like me who have some credibility and expertise and are trying to give you really an honest opinions. And if you watched and caught yesterday's episode, the previous episode with Nadim Shahadi, this is a guy who we basically got at it on Twitter. We were fighting and I brought him on my show as a guest for part one of an interview that was rather contentious, but still just like honest debate that you're not going to find in a lot of different places. And it was like people who are not paid shills who are actually expressing very differing opinions, clashing and trying to find common ground while at the same time trying to define differences. So onto this extraordinary development, this signing that you see. This deal is formally called the Mecca Joint Defense Agreement. At the signing ceremony, as you're seeing, is Mohammed bin Salman, the Saudi Crown Prince, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, and Pakistan's Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif. They were signing this document. This is kind of a counterpoint and counter argument to the much vaunted Abraham Accords that the U.S. has been peddling under Trump and Biden, this sort of attempt to get the Arab countries that are pro-American into a defense cooperation agreement with Israel. That plan has gone nowhere, but this one has gone somewhere. And I think that overall, this is a major step. It's much more significant than people give it credit for. And you see some like neoconservatives, some like pro-Israel pundits out there essentially downplaying this. Again, another case of sour grapes. This is like sour grapes Friday here for all sorts of people, because what they've wanted more than anything, the pro-Israel crowd in the U.S. and Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel, they've wanted an agreement between Saudi Arabia and Israel. This has been their dream. They've been peddling this for 5 or 6 years. And the Saudis have said, look, we'll get into a deal with you. We will get into an accord with Israel. We will agree to be part of the Israel alliance. We'll normalize relations. Hey, no problem. One thing you got to do, you got to give like some kind of decent treatment to the Palestinians. You have to either offer them a state or some kind of entity, give them a little bit of dignity, because it's going to look really bad for us to be making a deal with you as you're committing a genocide or ethnic cleansing or just war crimes against Palestinian civilians. That just doesn't fly. We're Saudi Arabia. We're the guardian of the major holy sites in Islam. It would be a really bad look for us to be signing a deal with Israel as it's killing Gaza babies. And so that deal went nowhere because things only got worse with the Palestinians and Israel. Israel became even more bloodthirsty, more land grabbing in recent years. And so that joining of Saudi Arabia with the Abraham Accords became more and more of a unfathomable prospect for Saudi Arabia and for the region. And meanwhile, you have this war that the U.S. and Israel launched, creating major security worries, major economic worries for the countries of the region. And these countries, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Turkey, and potentially Egypt, they were the ones who were trying to come up with some kind of diplomatic solution to this war, some kind of resolution. They were taking the initiative, not the Europeans, not the French, not Norway, the sponsors of the Oslo Accords back in the 90s, none of the traditional international players, and not even the other superpowers of the world, not China, not Russia, not Brazil even, not any of the emerging powers, not India, but these middle powers kind of banded together to do this. And I think that in the process of talking and trying to bring Iran and the U.S. together, trying to figure out a way of a formula for keeping the peace in this region so that the oil supplies would keep flowing and the energy infrastructure wouldn't be destroyed, these guys were like, hey, you know what? We're pretty good at this, actually. Fuck the Europeans, fuck the Americans, screw Russia and China. Why don't we make our own defense agreement? And I think this is really good for the stability of the region. These people are stepping up. They're giving a big middle finger to the U.S. and to the other superpowers. And they're saying, you know what? We're the adults in the room now. You people, you like Russian crazy people, you attacking Ukraine and like launching this insane war. Yeah, you're kind of losers. Stay away, you know? And then you Americans, what the absolute F did you do here? This, like, you basically defecated on the whole region. You destabilized the whole region. We're going to like basically be the adults in the room now. And you know what? Pakistan to some extent is a surrogate for China. Let's be honest. And I think that China is very much quietly backing this deal. This is the way they like to work, kind of behind the scenes. So I think that this is really good for the region. This is a really good thing that is coming out of the region. This is not necessarily a defense agreement against Iran or against the U.S. It is not necessarily even against Israel. It's definitely just for the countries of the region. So I think that that is going to be interesting. And I think that that is going to help actually stabilize markets because of the U.S., Russia, few other countries around the world are just completely loose cannons. These countries are going off the rails, and they are being irresponsible in a way that, is creating these massive power vacuums, creating these massive troubles. And these countries are helping to stabilize markets, stabilize oil supply, stabilize energy supplies. This is really good news for the region. And I think in the end, even if Iran might be a little bit nervous about it, they will come around to agreeing that this is the best solution to the area. You have this multi-ethnic group of countries. It's like Pakistani, Turkish, and Arab coming together to sort of deal with the crisis at hand and other future crises. That is a positive development. And I think that those who are opposed to it and have been speaking out against it, it's just a matter of sour grapes. And now on to this matter of Scott Bessent and his commentary. It does really, as I've said in previous episodes, it does really look like the U.S. and Iran are heading to some sort of deal. As I've noted repeatedly, it's not because suddenly Donald Trump had a change of heart and he's become like a peace negotiator and a peace advocate, and suddenly he saw the light, the wrongs of war. No, it's because they launched this massive war of imperial conquest and annihilation, and they failed. And the U.S. military planners, and as has been reported in recent days in multiple leaks, they've been telling Trump, and they've been essentially informing him that the U.S. does not have enough munitions or defensive equipment and defensive interceptors to both launch another round of attacks on Iran and to defend Israel or defend the Gulf Arab states and their energy infrastructure. And not only that, they might not even have enough to defend the U.S. if they keep at this clip. And there's all these reports, like in the Washington Post and a few other news outlets, they got to it later, that Donald Trump has been throwing temper tantrums, trying to blame Pete Hegseth, who's blaming the Deputy Defense Secretary, who's this billionaire Epstein class adherent who somehow managed to finagle his way into the Pentagon as a Deputy Defense Director. I don't know what it is with these billionaires like Scott Bessent. Why don't you just enjoy your money? You have kids and shit. Why are you getting into this dirty game of government, man? Go sail on a yacht, for God's sake. So, but anyway, these people are in the government, and this is way more than they bargained for. I'm sure they were hoping for the prestige and power of office, and then they're being basically made fun of by everyone in the world, and they look like a bunch of ass clowns. And Scott Bessent is basically saying, look, yeah, as the Iranians are saying, there is going to be changes in the way that the Persian Gulf is. The Strait of Hormuz is never going back to the way it was. But what they don't understand is that what that means is that we're going to build over the next 1 or 2 years, okay, we're going to build a pipeline infrastructure to get energy out of the Middle East without having to go to the Strait of Hormuz. Now, a few problems with that, 3 to 5 years maybe. And if that happens, to build this sort of expansive pipeline network, and lots of billions and billions of infrastructure money. Where are they going to get that money? Seriously, they're just going to borrow it. Eventually it'll be paid back. It's not a bad investment, but seriously, that's really how they're going to do it. There's also the other problem of LNG, natural gas, doesn't really travel well through pipelines. It's ships are the best way to move that, the liquefied natural gas, compressed natural gas. I don't know. I'm not an energy expert, but I've talked to energy experts, and really the ships are the best way to move that product, that particular molecule. And then there's other issues as well with this scheme. First of all, being that yeah, you can move oil out and gas, but what about other stuff? What about fertilizer precursors? What about ammonia and all these other things that come out of the Persian Gulf that are super important for the global economy? And that is important. But also, how about getting stuff to the Gulf? You're still going to need the Gulf, like Jebel Ali port and other ports in the Gulf. These are major commercial hubs, and they need those ships. What are you going to bring all that stuff via truck over Saudi Arabia? No, the best way is to have shipping containers. The infrastructure is right there already. So I think that it's a fantasy to believe that you're going to basically turn the Persian Gulf, as Scott Bessent said, into just some useless lake. That's just not the truth. That's not the fact of the matter. But also, I think from the Iranian point of view, if they get control of the Strait of Hormuz, they have a certain security interest there in that the U.S. can't flood the Persian Gulf with its weapons anymore. And again, it can't start building up arms in that area unless, I guess, you can bring certain weapons in by plane and transport planes and so on. on, but like the best way to bring those in is to bring them in via ship. And the best way to build that infrastructure is via freight ships and so on. And so if they close the Strait of Hormuz and Iran maintains de facto Strait of Hormuz control, that is in its interest as well. And, you know, whatever, who cares if they can't blackmail the global economy and to hurt like countries like Iraq or Qatar and even like Kuwait and so on. The main point is to get the U.S. to not launch a war against Iran again, and closing off the Strait of Hormuz to U.S. military traffic just very well might give Iran that guarantee, or at least some semblance of it. In any case, more and more great stuff coming next week. Great interviews coming up. Please subscribe if you can. Please become a paid subscriber if you can. I'm Borzou Daragahi. This is Badlands. You can subscribe at borzou.substack.com. I'm also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube.